Hello, good evening to all. Welcome to the first webinar for the year. Good evening to all. Welcome to the first webinar of the year. We will wait for next 5 minutes to let everyone join for this session. Good evening to all, and we are starting with our first session for the webinar for 2024. We'll wait for a few more minutes to let everyone to join in. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is Bhavin Lard, the Director of Events. Welcome you for the first webinar of the year of 2024. Uh, a Happy New Year to all, and thank you for joining for the first webinar. I want to, for the first webinar, we have Shahid Din, the respected person and a well-known person in the domain of this project management. And I want to congratulate and thank you for giving us time for this particular webinar. And I would request to please subscribe to our and connect with our UAE chapter. So keeping updated. Lot of things in terms of events and webinars are on the way. So please be connected and try to explore as much as possible. And also, I'm trying to welcome the other UAE, other chapter members for joining this particular webinar. Thank you. I will hand the place to the moderator of the day, Mr. Anchal. Please, Anchal, stage
Thanks,
is yours.
Bhavin.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, if in any case somebody is joining from other part of the continents. A very happy New Year, 2024. Wish you a very prosperous and lovely New Year for all the webinar audience who have been joining with us in the different series in 2023 and who are continuing this journey with us in 2024. And the people who are joining us first time, a very warm welcome, guys, for you. This is an important platform for UAE chapter because we do this webinar series every month in order to keep the pace and the knowledge levels for bringing the value to our webinar chapter members. So my name is Anchal Chaube. If you don't know me by the past series, I'm the host for you tonight with our audience. And also I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Shahid Din. Before that, about our today's topic, which you must be aware, is how to project manage yourself and your team basically, and how to really understand the ever-changing business landscape and all the uncertainties which comes into the project areas, right, as a new normal now. So with all this happening around with in this particular scenario, we have Shahid with us today, who is going to present his thoughts, his expertise, his experiences, and also will help us to understand rapid change and complexity, how he has overcome. He will share some more insights and most valuable aspects of understanding the core concepts of uncertainty around us. Okay, and hopefully this is very common thing with all of us, because we know that new normal is change, right? So we cannot get away from it, and that's why we are talking about it into the first thing in the first webinar in 2024. So with that in mind, now I will be working to at the background. We have Amir as well as the other team members from Parvez and Bhavin to introduce himself, who have been working with us in order to introduce this webinar to you guys. I would like to introduce some housekeeping notes for the people who are joining us here as an audience. This webinar would be around nearly about 60 minutes. Of course, we will be keeping the topic to the core, and of course, we will be giving you a short Q&A time as well at the end, so that if any kind of questions or doubts or clarification you require in order to be answered by our esteemed speaker, you will get that time. Please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A section into the chat there. That will help me to collate them in terms of the right logical section as well. So I will be trying to accommodate everybody's question, but if in that case I could not, please don't get offended by that, because we have to keep the time frame in mind as well. So with that, let me just also give you a heads up that I'm going to introduce you now to a chapter introduction slide initially. And then after that, I will introduce Shahid virtually over there. And then, of course, the floors will be his altogether for you. So let me share my screen for all of you to introduce the chapter for all of us. Give me a second. There you go. Okay, so this is basically, of course, we know that this is a UAE chapter, and we are the part of the PMI Institute, which has been founded in 1969 with a group of project managers. Now, after 50 years, it has been still the source of resources with all the project management activities and whatever the new things happen around us. One of the largest professional organization around the world. A lot of sponsors publish their research, thought leadership. Also, we offer a lot of training and accreditation to the community. We have the vision of a UAE chapter, which is basically empower and influence individuals with innovative project economy principles to turn ideas into their realities. So with this vision, we have a mission statement attached, which says that to disrupt and create value-driven opportunities to our chapter members and partners, and to become agile, innovative, productive in the platform for growth of the project economy. So this is the mission of the chapter. And as you see, the chapter is quite up and growing around there. So all driven by 100% volunteers, 3,000 plus active chapter members there, ranked among top 5 chapters, more importantly in EMA region. We also serve the UAE aspiring community and also hold the certifications in the project management and professionals as well. So depending on all of you who have been the different members around us and have been the contributors, please make our chapter much more interactive and these webinars as much as interesting as possible. Our chapter board consists of Mr. Adil Sultan as a president heading over there, and rest of the board members supporting him from all the aspects there. Coming to the membership benefits, definitely there are a lot of benefits which goes with the chapter membership. Few of them are listed there on the very highest level. You can think about the PMI, of course, the PMBOK, certification discounts, access to standards and career navigator into the PMI website, community access to project management as a forum. And of course, we do a lot of events as well, which are definitely being welcomed by the exclusive members, tools and templates, which also goes hand in hand with that. With 4 particular pillars as a benefit, we work on networking, learning about knowledge sharing, career growth, and events. So this series, what we are doing today, is the part of diversified webinar under the events pillar. You can get more information in the different social media handles including the LinkedIn as well as the Facebook and of course the YouTube as well there. where all these webinars get published afterwards. So you can go through the recording if you need there. So this is about the chapter introduction around there. Of course, I will not take very long time to introduce Shahid, who is already, you can see him now there. So Shahid has been into the particular arena since quite some time already, highly experienced future strategist and working in the field of agile, very passionate about navigating the changes, achieving their goals, and then of course successfully implementing the solutions and driving the growth with different sort of industries. He's well known for his anticipating emerging trends and finding the opportunities, developing the cross-functional teams, and overall the driving the transformational with ease. So his understanding is very much deep in terms of understanding the business landscapes, and he's a go-to expert for organizations to seeking the master art of change and staying ahead of that curve. So that's how the Shahid's explain himself overall, but I will not take much time of Shahid's time there, and I will hand over the stage to him to take us through the uncertainties. Mr. Shahid.
Yeah, thank you, Anshul. Welcome, everybody. Fantastic to see 136 people here. Reading through some of the comments, people from France, people from Canada, people from Dubai, people from India, Pakistan. This is absolutely fantastic. So look, we've got just under an hour, so bear with me. Getting into the deep intricacies of uncertainty obviously can take some time, but I'm really hoping that we can cover some key elements, that there is some value that you take away from today's session. And as Anshul said, feel free to fire some questions over, and let's see what we kind of get out of the just under an hour now. So what is the core concept that we're really talking about? Anshul, just to check, is my screen sharing okay? Can everyone see the full screen?
Yeah, we can see the full
Fantastic.
screen.
So there we go. The first uncertainty as we look to work with technology. So really, look, we've been hearing about uncertainty. I know this is not a new word, but we're really going to try and explore this in the landscape of uncertainty within project management. So, we're in an age, there is constant disruption going on around us. If you were to actually put change on a graph, you would see that it is extremely steep now, the graph, and we just need to look at some of the examples. We take something as something that we all understand, ChatGPT. Where did that come from? Absolutely nowhere. And we're all in the business of people. So when we look at ChatGPT, it literally took days for a disruption like Gen AI, like ChatGPT, to come in and just completely change the way that we're operating. I'm sure all of you are at some point dabbled with it. Now, the only certainty is uncertainty, and we're going to be navigating some of these uncharted waters. I think one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is really to embrace new thinking. If we're going to create new actions, then we've got to start changing the mindset. This is not about processes and tools. This is about us as humans and how do we change. And fundamentally, when I look at project management, and I think if you look at the latest PMP since 2021, the focus is people. It is not process. It is not tools. It is not technology. It's about how we as people operate. And I think the key message that I'm going to kind of put out here right now is we need to remember what got us here today may not get us there tomorrow. So let's just see if this slideshow is working. Okay, we kind of done a bit of a brief. Look, the main thing that I'm really saying here, change is not a threat. Look, it's an opportunity. Embrace it, because we need to unlock this world of possibilities. So as Anshul said, I've been around a while. My sort of involvement with PMI goes as far back as 2008. We were some of the pioneers. Back then, we were known as SMG, and we really brought project management into the UAE And I'm really proud to have said, that we've worked with some of the biggest, the names across the Middle East, from your RTAs to your DWAs to your Emirates Group. So I'm kind of proud to say that I played a small part in evolving project management. When I got the buzz for the PMP and my claim to fame, one that I'm very, very proud of, I did the PMP in 1 hour, 42 minutes. So that's my claim to fame. But really around about 2016, I started embracing a lot of agility. And for me, it's not about traditional versus the agile debate. To me, I am an enabler of value. And when I'm working with my customers, what I'm really trying to work out here is I'm trying to understand, what are they trying to do? I'm trying to define the problem statement and really understand, what is it that we're not seeing? So I don't want this to really get into a debate of, no, waterfall is better, agile is better. I think really it's a case of saying, how can we put all of the tools and all of the techniques into our toolbox, so when we get to a problem statement, we can pull out the right kind of tool. Again, I've been very, very fortunate to have worked across many, many industries. Some of you might be looking at me right now saying, wow, he's so young. Look, I am 45. For those that are married, just use your wife's SK2 creams. They work wonders for you to keep you very youthful. But I've been across different industries. And I guess the thing that I've seen, we're all facing the same problem. It's just a different context. So, as I said, sort of since 2008, I've been heading up an organization called the Learning Initiative. And really, what are we all about? We're about people transformation. And under that, we're covering consulting and training and advisory services. So let's kind of kick things off with a brief checkup, right? So I want you to use the chat box as we kind of get into this. So in the context of project management, I would love to hear from you. What is going well? What is actually going well for you in the context of project management? Feel free to use the chat. Delivering value to business, managing the project, waterfall to agile, transition, collaboration. Oh, monitoring risks. We're going to talk about risk, communication. All right, getting to be a domain expert. So if we know what's going well, what is not going so well? Just trying to get a little pulse of what's going on. So when we say, let's go to what's not going so well. So if we say team building, is that not going so well? Okay, fantastic. Stakeholder buy-in. Sharif, fantastic. Communication, changing needs. On one hand, managing risk is going well. On another hand, risk is not going so well. So somebody's mentioned here scope creep. So when was the last time you successfully delivered a project without any change requests? Because I've been on projects now since probably 2008. I have never, thank you, David, I have never been on a project where there hasn't been change. And unfortunately, the way that we kind of look at change, we look at it as a negative. Oh no, there's a change, something's got to happen, we've got to do this, what's the baseline? So we got to recognize that change is inherent in project management. Absolutely. It's inevitable and we need to manage them. So when we look at some of the aspects of how we're planning projects right now, what we're actually seeing is that we're being far too predictive, and we're almost saying that the plan is the goal. But remember, when we look at what PMI teaches us, and unfortunately some of us, and myself included, we take all the learning from the books and then we throw away the things that we don't want to learn and we don't want to apply. So what we've really seen in the real world is planning is almost being seen as 100% accuracy. But we know from all of our experiences, the only time we can get to a level of accuracy is when we get to UAT. And what happens typically in UAT? The big fire. Everybody's panicked. We're all panicked about the go live. So let's have a quick look at what's going on. So some of the trends that we're seeing, we already know project management. And for those that are project managers, it is like navigating a tricky maze. Look, there are challenges at every turn. Now, what we're seeing, and some of these stats are pulled out, one of the major roadblocks that we've seen is that project failures are happening because the goals are not as clear as they need to be. There is typically not enough of a roadmap. And this is where we get into the costly detours. Now, there's also another staggering statistic here: fail because of a lack of alignment between projects and business objectives, right? So we're trying to tango here. There's two left feet and there is no coordination. So what's happening at the beginning and what is being executed, very, very different. But one of the stats that really stuck out for me is about risk management practices. So what we're typically seeing in the global stats is only 27% of organizations are actually using risk management practices. Now, risk management is our safety net, and I'm sure you've heard, all of you have kind of heard this. Risk is all about the known unknowns. So the things that we know may come up so that we can actually deal with kind of mitigating these, whether it's a positive or it's a negative mitigation. We know we can deal with it. We know we got a plan in place. But risk really differs from uncertainty, and we're going to have a look at that. So we're actually at the crossroads of chaos right now and success. So if we know these stats, we know project management is very, very difficult. Look, when I first stepped into project management, it was probably the most complex thing I ever did, because not only am I dealing with people necessarily that I don't have relationships with and the business is aligned away from where the execution is doing, we're dealing with people. And we know from PMI and we know from the PMP, one of the roles that we need to play as project managers is not about the how do we put all the tools and techniques in place. It's really about how do we motivate, how do we build high-performing teams, how do we build resilience, and how do we actually get teams to kind of coordinate and collaborate. So with these stats known, the problem is that we're carrying the same problem forward. And this is what we call the project paradox. So I think we all agree that knowledge will grow every day in projects. The problem is that we're coming up with the worst strategy. We don't know enough information and we're making all of the big decisions up front. We know from the agile world, there's a concept called the cone of uncertainty, right? So at the beginning, uncertainty is really big. It's really huge, but we're making all the decisions. And then what we're trying to do through the phases of the project is align back. And all that really happens is we deviate further and further away. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, why are we making all the biggest decisions at a time when we have the least knowledge? So what we have seen as an organization is that typically an organization has immune system responses, right? We've never done it before. Nobody else has ever done it before. It's not my job. You've probably heard all of these. There are over 50 reasons not to change. But let's just link this to an example that we can understand. So when you need a kidney transplant, doctors are going to use a process called immunosuppression, which actually lowers our immune system. So if you think about the immune system in your body, it's a defense system and it protects you from these harmful invaders. So if a doctor was just to put a kidney straight in on a kidney transplant, what would happen? Your body would typically reject it. And that's what we're seeing in the corporate world. We're actually seeing that our immune systems are so strong that we're not actually able to reduce them. So the idea here is we've got to find the balance. If you're going to bring change about, and this is especially true for some of the larger enterprises where our success that we have seen has created hierarchies. It has created systems. It has created processes. It has created specialisms, which means that we're now working in silos. But fundamentally, what are we doing as project managers? We are delivering value. And what does value not care about? Value does not care about your departments. Value will cut across the departments. So we know all the things that we should be doing. The challenge is that the immune system of our organization is actually stopping us. So we need to find ways to actually deal with this. So what exactly is uncertainty? Let's try and decode this, because a lot of people I've spoken to are actually saying, well, isn't uncertainty just risk? Well, risk and uncertainty definitely are related concepts, but they do have distinct characteristics. So as I said, when I think about risk to me is the known unknowns, right? What do we think is going to come up? How do we mitigate against it? But uncertainty, on the other hand, is where the probability of outcomes is basically unknown. It cannot be accurately estimated. We just don't have the right information, and we know that the future is really unpredictable. So when we embrace uncertainty, it doesn't mean that we need to relinquish control. It's really about forging this dynamic alliance with change. And what's actually going on when we think about uncertainty, when we actually go back and we look at the way our minds operate, nothing has actually changed since the days of the caveman, right? We know there's a fight or flight response system. So when we are seeing uncertainty, unfortunately, we're just not seeing it as a reward. We're seeing it as a threat. And when we see uncertainty as a threat, one of the things that's actually taking place inside our minds is the inability to do all the sort of strategic thinking. And I won't get too much into the neuroscience of it all today, because that's a topic that can really explode. But we have a thing called a prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex inside our brain, which sits at the front, is really how we make all our decisions. Now, working with a number of these large clients and working with simulations, what we have experienced and seen is the minute we throw uncertainty, somehow we as human beings can't logically apply any concept of decision making. We start getting into a panic, and we go from what's called our comfort zone into what's called a panic zone. And that's what's causing us not to be able to take the actions and the steps that we need to do. What we need to think about is, how do we go from our comfort zone and into what's called a learning zone? So imagine you're learning a new language. You're going to learn French now. Now, to understand French, you're going to have to be adaptable. You're going to have to learn new words in a foreign language. So we need to adjust to these uncertainties. So I want to really just say, uncertainty isn't the enemy. Uncertainty is really where creativity kicks in, where things are uncertain. And I know we want to stick to what we know. This is really where the bold ideas, this is really where the innovation kicks in. And as we see some of the disruptions, the chat GPTs and things like that are born. So we've got to really start embracing the uncertainty. So most of us already know this. The world is evolving at an unprecedented pace. We're seeing so much technical advancement. We've got challenges with global crisis and societal shifts, which are creating this uncertain future. Look, we keep talking about digital transformation, digital this, digital that. Digital has actually been around for over 20 years. What we're actually seeing is that digital transformation is actually changing the way society operates, which in turn is changing the way we as humans are operating. And one of the things that I'm seeing here as through the research and some of the training that we're doing, look, as humans, we need to communicate differently now. We are socializing differently. And what we've seen all of a sudden is over 20 exponential technologies have hit the market. This is not about just AI or data science. We're actually seeing robotics, biotechnology, VR, AR, AI, all merging, which is causing an even faster, rapid rate of change. And it is simply putting organizations under immense pressure. It's not that we don't know we need to transform. I think we've got to the point where we already recognize that we need to transform. The challenge is, it's some of the management paradigms of the past that we are holding on to that is actually stopping us from embracing the future. Look, does anybody know what the greatest invention ever was? Feel free to use the chat. What's the greatest invention ever invented by man? Oh, I love it. I'm a screwdriver. Yeah. The wheel. Internet. Yeah, look, computers. In fact, what we're actually seeing, the greatest invention ever invented is Management 1.0. Management 1.0 was created at a time where there wasn't a rapid rate of change, where there was a systematic way of doing things. We were doing things for a long period of time, and we needed to create the process and the flows and the steps. What we're actually seeing now is that there needs to be a shift in the way that we manage or lead. And as a project manager, for me, a project manager is a leader. You are not just leading an initiative to deliver some value. You are leading people through change. Remember, project management is about creating a new desired future state, whether that's organizational structure or a new product. And that means as a leader, we really need to think about what we're doing. Now, what we have seen is, and this is not new, right? We're seeing a term which is being coined as VUCA. Now, VUCA is an acronym that actually stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Came from the military. It's been widely adopted now in the business and leadership context. And if you look at a lot of the world around the West, this has been fairly understood. VUCA for me in the Middle East, still something that is fairly new, really been talked about in the last sort of 6 months. Now, the world has changed, and VUCA means that we're being challenged. When we look at volatility, we're talking about the rate of speed, the unpredictability in change. It's a volatile environment. Tomorrow we wake up, we saw volatility. And I think one of the biggest examples I'll give you is COVID, right? It is challenging to anticipate and plan for any of your future developments. When we look at uncertainty, we're saying, hey, there's a lack of predictability. There is an inability with all this rate of change that's happening. It is making it harder and harder for decision making because we just don't know what the outcomes are. Everything is becoming a little bit less clear. When we look at complexity, look at the interconnectedness of the world, the digital hybrid physical world, complex environments, relationships are changing. We're having to think really at a systems level. So when you think about your organization, the system is no longer your department or your product. The system is your organization. And then we look at the ambiguity. There seems to be a lack of clarity, meaning there are multiple, often conflicting interpretations of information. So which way should we go? There is more than one way to get there. Well, which one should we pick? So we're very much firmly in this VUCA world, and this VUCA world is shifting. You'll hear some new terms. Have a look at it. We're not talking about it today, but BANI, B-A-N-I, a brittle and anxious and non-linear world. Nothing is linear anymore. We're talking about exponential. Everything is exponential now. So this means that leadership has become extremely complex. We're leading in the face of uncertainty. So when we actually look at our traditional leadership, where we are close to certainty and when we were close to agreement, and there are things that we know, this is where we really need to develop plans. We need to create the structures. We really need to think about telling people what, and potentially what we've been doing is telling them how to do their work. We're controlling and managing performance. But we're actually seeing something very different. We're all seeing that there is no real agreement. There is no certainty right now. We're very, very far away from that. So this is really forcing us to look at a concept called adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership's been around for a while. We've heard the terms adaptive. It's about being flexible, and it's about leading people. So when we look at adaptive leadership, what we're actually saying is this new style of leadership is what helps us address the uncertainty. So when we're building relationships, it is about forging these strong connections with your team members, your colleagues, your clients. What we need to think about is how do we create a positive work environment, one that actually enhances collaboration. Now, I know I saw in the chat earlier a couple of people saying collaboration is going well. Well, is it? Look, the bottom line is within a matrix environment, and most of us are not full-time on projects, what we're actually seeing is that some of our loyalties still lie with our functional manager, right? Who does my leave? Who does my performance bonus? And then we're being put on projects, being asked to shift to a future state, but our priorities are still within our siloed function. We're not collaborating because of the immune systems. We're not collaborating because of the typical siloed structures of some of the large organizations that we're working in. And there is a big difference between collaboration and what I call cooperation. And I think at most, from the work that I've done over the last sort of 12 months, I've worked with about 1,000 leaders globally, predominantly over the Middle East and Asia. And it's been agreed that collaboration is an extremely difficult thing to do. Why? Because it takes time. What is the asset you have the least of? It's time. So it does require a rethink. We need to welcome differences. Look, we need to unlock the power of collective intelligence. Diversity, recognizing that different people bring different skills, experiences, and perspectives. As a project manager, very, very easy to tell people what to do and how to do it. But something we need to think about is who does the planning? Who actually knows more about what needs to be done? Is it us as project leaders, or is it the people on the ground? So how do we get the voice? How do we get the diversity so that we can get some of these innovative solutions and start having the confidence around making decisions to move us forward? When we question norms and beliefs, what am I talking about? It's about a culture where employees are comfortable challenging some of the practices. Look, we can't keep coming up with this is how we do it. If this is how we do it isn't giving us the result, and I don't mean the result of the outcome of the project, because another trend that we saw, we will always deliver results. But under what condition? Under conditions that we are extremely stressed, under conditions where we don't enjoy working on the project, under conditions where there is constant conflict. So if we don't question these norms and beliefs, then it does come back to, look, what got us here today is not going to get us there tomorrow. Somebody needs to lead. And we're going to need to really encourage this creative thinking. So I looked at a study from NASA. They did a study on around 1,600 children, and they did the study over 3 or 4 periods of time up until the point where the children had become, I think they'd come to an age of about 30. What we saw there was that creativity is being killed because of the social norms, the environments that we're in. As children, we're asking why. If you're anything like me as a parent, we just tell our children, stop asking me why. It's a just do it. If your child is trying to climb a tree, you're trying to stop them doing it. We need to create the environment. There is no point saying think outside the box and expect people to think outside the box when we haven't built an environment of caring leadership. And if caring leadership isn't there and the empathy isn't there and we're not understanding people, we're not creating the environment, then how can you expect people to dare? Meaning, how can they take risks? We're going to need to encourage people to open up. We're going to need to really recognize if there is some silence and your lead people are taking over. How do we create the environment for other people to talk? And it does come back to these open discussions, as I said, and it's not just open discussions. It's about having honest discussions. It's honest discussions that are valued. We've got to recognize, and I think we all do, that project management is about communication. It is about solving problems. It is about working with people at different levels. You've got your project team, you've got your stakeholders, you've got your customers. If you're in certain industries, you're dealing with the regulators as well. How do we promote this culture of continuous improvement? So adaptive leadership in itself, quite a big topic, but it does kind of show you that we need to shift from telling to actually opening up and creating the opportunity to collaborate and have the right kind of communications. And one of the things that we've seen is when we're leading in the face of uncertainty and we try and be a bit too predictive, in some cases, a plan can easily become an anchor and it locks your organization into a path that's not relevant because we agreed some scope, we agreed some time, we agreed some cost. Even if the value is changing, we just kind of continue following that route. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow traditional project management. Like I said at the beginning, we need to understand some factors. So if we know some answers and there's no real learning, and we look at this next point, if you need to operate in a different way than you do now, then it is about adaptive leadership. It is about embracing some of the agility. If the problem and the solution requires learning, then you're going to need to try a different way. And if we just don't have the answers and you're going to need to experiment, then we're going to have to look at adaptive. The traditional ways don't necessarily work. But again, it's not about saying one or the other. Maybe we need to take a hybrid approach because there are some environmental factors we need to think about. What are your organizational policies? What are the environmental factors within your organization? What does the culture look like within your organization? How mature is project management? Do you have a PMO? Do you have decision trees? Do you have access to the stakeholders on a regular basis? Because if some of these factors don't work, then we really do need to think about what does that hybrid way of working look like. So there is no one right answer. Each one of us have individual nuances. Remember we said right at the beginning, if you've been on a PMP, a project is a temporary endeavor to undertake a unique. And what do I mean by unique? The simple explanation is just because you did an SAP ERP implementation in one organization, we cannot take a copy paste and put it in another organization. There are some unique factors that we need to consider. The people are different, the processes are different, the environment is different, the leader is different. And I think sometimes very easy as we jump into execution, we forget some of these things. So something I love, I heard this from Jeff Bezos, from Amazon, live the it's always day one mindset. So today is all about staying in a state of innovation, urgency, and forward thinking. So this concept originated from Jeff Bezos. What is it all about? When we look at some of the principles, it is about customer obsession. So when we first start, many organizations, when they first start, they're very collaborative, they're organized around the customer. And through our success, we end up, like I said, building structures, hierarchies, and specialisms. And we almost forget that it's the value to the customer. And I'm not just talking external, because a customer can also be internal. We're going to need to embrace agility and adaptability because things are changing. Technologies are coming in. We've even seen customer preferences are changing regularly. I'm sure most of you have heard of the concept of design thinking, and we do the one-time persona and the one-time empathy map. But what we're seeing in the market, product life cycles are being reduced. The typical life cycle of a product is only 6 months. So how do we bring that in? How do we embrace that in more of an agile way? How do we become more open to experimentation and learning? In some of the organizations that I've been talking to, some of the top leaders, look, the word failure is not allowed. We need to embrace the word failure. So it's about innovation. It's about experimenting. It's about taking risks. It's about taking action. There needs to be more of a bias towards action. And it's about having that entrepreneurial spirit. Look, as a project manager, I always felt I was the CEO, and what is in the best interest of my organization, what is in the best interest of my customer, and what is in the best interest of my team. So as a project leader, I felt that I knew well enough about what's the right things to be doing through obviously a lot of discussion with people. So we need to encourage also the entrepreneurship, or if we call it intrapreneurship. How do we take ownership of these projects? And one of the last sort of principles that Jeff Bezos talks about is continuous improvement. And what the day one mindset is basically saying, it's a commitment to continuous improvement. It's a commitment to learning. And it's about saying, Let's not get complacent or stagnate. Let's foster this culture that is constantly looking to improve. So with this new mindset, we call it a dare to discover mindset. So just checking the time as well. We need to start thinking like scientists. Does a scientist fail only once? No, a scientist fails multiple times. Unfortunately, what I've seen is one of the immune systems doesn't allow it. If you're in banking, stop thinking like a banker. If you're in telco, stop thinking like a telco engineer. If you're in government, let's stop thinking like that. We've got to start looking at what are scientists doing? How are they doing things? Because they run various experiments till they find success. And if they don't find success, they're also comfortable in saying there is no value. And I think that's another thing that we kind of miss in projects. We keep driving even though the value isn't happening. So the very first thing is about how do we observe, right? How do we observe the experience before we start solutioning? And typically as project managers and project leaders, we're told to come up with a solution. We've got to stop that. We've got to start creating more problem-solving cultures instead of solution-based cultures, because we don't want to put ourselves back in the point of trying to make all the decisions at the front. The second part of that is the questioning, right? So let's question around us. Let's try and understand. Scientists are typically asking empirical questions. It unlocks the creative thinking. When we look at exploration, it's about how do we discover the truths? What is actually working? What isn't? And that's really where we start looking at iterations. So we work in small chunks, in small time boxes. We plan something, we do it, we check it, and we're able to adjust because we're getting the constant feedback. So it brings me to this point of, well, how do you eat an elephant? In the face of uncertainty, it really comes down to we need to break it down one piece at a time, right? Now, the uncertainty in eating an elephant is we don't know if there's going to be a mouse in the room, so we don't know what the elephant's going to do. But if you're going to eat it one part at a time. And this is what we need to start thinking about when we're looking at uncertainty. We need to break down uncertainty into manageable portions. So this is really where the agility advantage kicks in. And I'm not talking about the manifesto and the values and sprints and scrums, but it really is about saying, how do we take a shift from what's on the right? It's about behavioral shift. It's a mindset thing before it's anything. And I'm not saying throw away everything you know. Some of the tools and techniques are still going to be very relevant, some of the practices, but we have to question, why do we do things the way that we do them? So when we look at on the right, we see risk aversion, and we want to go to tolerating managed risk and accepting a degree of failure. I've seen in organizations, we're saying we need to innovate, but we're too risk averse. We're not willing to accept failure. When we look at command and control, and I think this is kind of being stereotyped a little bit, I've seen many great project managers that are asking the questions, but fundamentally, we need to be delegating. We need to create visibility. We need to create transparency. I've seen too many times watermelon projects, the ones that are green on the outside, they're red on the inside. How do we become more transparent? We've got to empower people. We've got to unlock this power of collective intelligence. In projects, we typically focus on costs. I've seen many times we present 3 options to our leaders. This is the one we shouldn't do. This is one that we could do. And this is the recommended one. And typically they try and go with something that doesn't cost too much. But really what we need to focus on when we're talking about customers is, what is the cost of delay? What happens if we don't do this project? What would be the impact to our customer? What would be the impact to our organization? What would be the impact to risk or opportunity? And I think that changes the way that we actually prioritize and select projects. Can do or can't do versus can do. I think that's fairly straightforward. But one of the problems that we're still seeing we're driven by the allegiance to our silo. Like I said, where's my salary? Where's my bonus? Who's doing my leave? So we got to really create this collaborative approach. How do we get different people from different departments, different disciplines, backgrounds? How do we get them to come together? How do we get them working as a unified team towards what we're calling common goals, right? So we want to break down some of these silos. We want to apply systems thinking, and we want to encourage communication, cooperation. And one of the challenges I've seen with collaboration is because it takes so much time and because we're afraid of conflict, we tend not to do that. So we've got to really start encouraging that. And conflict is not bad as long as it's healthy conflict, as long as it's debate. And that can only really happen when we've kind of built trust in our project team and in our project environments and the wider organization. So with the whole agile concept, what we're talking about is discovering hidden paths along the way. The challenge is with one-time planning, and even though PMI doesn't say this in the material, we know that we're going to progressively elaborate. We know that the first plan we do is not the final answer. Unfortunately, we're forced into a corner and we're asked to submit a plan which gets approved. That means any change to time, cost, or scope is a problem. And the problem with that, both risk is growing and also deviation. And by the time we get to UAT, it's so far off. What we really need to think about is adaptive planning. How do we recognize, or firstly, we've got to recognize this dynamic, unpredictable nature of the modern business environment that we're actually in. So we're thinking about how can we be more flexible in our response, right? As we said, one-time planning relies on a fixed set of assumptions and predictions. I can't tell the future. I'm sure however many people are here, 160 people can't tell the future, right? But we need to be able to shift direction. We need to be able to get fast feedback. We need to be able to deal with these market conditions and the unexpected disruptions that are happening. And the second thing that adaptive planning allows us to really do is it creates that culture of continuous learning, right? We're going to learn as we go. We're going to embrace this plan, do, check, and adjust, and we're going to plan again and again at regular intervals. Now, for those that have worked in business agility environments, we actually have a mix of both. We do a large plan right at the beginning of, say, a 12-week cycle, which is to a certain level of detail, and we elaborate on the next 2 weeks, and we keep running this cycle until we deliver a 12-week cycle of work. So it's very, very easy to bring it together, but that's going to require a real culture shift, because when we do the large plan, we must recognize that if we're running projects with 100, 125 people, how do we get them together, and how do we get the business to recognize that planning cannot be done in a couple of hours? Planning is not just about a project manager coming up with some ideas and then forcing people into giving some estimates. It is about bringing people together, because the people doing the work are the ones that fully understand it. So we're using these iterations so that we can enable faster feedback and we can reduce risk, because inherently risk management is being built into a sprint. The worst you can go is 2 weeks. The biggest deviation you have is 2 weeks. And faster feedback is really about collaborating with the business. Typically, what I've seen in my traditional projects is we get all the business involved at the beginning. We get all the inputs, the business requirements are done. Who says they're done? The BA tick box. Who says the design is done? The architects or the systems architects. Who says development is done? Well, the developers do. Then who says that testing is done? The testers. And then we get to UAT and this is a big explosion and we're all panicking. So the problem that we've seen is that, especially when you're in some of these dynamic technology-driven projects, which most of us are now with the explosion of these 20 technologies, the cost of rework on these sort of projects, if you find the problem in UAT, is somewhere around 5,000%. So we want to run these mini UATs with our customers. We want to say, if there is a change, let's address that change before we do too much work and it costs too much to undo this. And it also allows us to recognize that after a period of time, there is enough value that we don't need to continuously deliver on all the scope. And I've been in many projects where we just have to keep delivering the scope, but there's no real value. Just think about one example. I use Microsoft Excel. Do I use the 8,000 features that are implemented in Excel? No, I probably use 4 or 5. So do we really need to keep delivering on the scope, or have we got enough value that gives our customer the satisfaction? So just in the closing kind of slide, I'm just mindful of time as well, Anshul. If we're delivering value amidst all of this uncertainty, one of the first things I'm saying to people is encourage a dare to discover mindset. Create an environment of caring, the empathy, the emotional intelligence, the support, the psychological safety, which is going to allow your teams to become more curious. It's going to allow them to try things and not be afraid. And they can actually get excited to learn from some of these unknown unknowns, right? When I look at experimentation as a learning tool, just think of yourself as a scientist in a lab. When you experiment, you're creating this curiosity. It's not about getting everything right the first time. We don't know the answers. We've got to test, we've got to learn from the results, and we've got to get better over time as the knowledge evolves. It is about fail fast, and it is about learning faster. For me, it's not about changing the word failure. We've got to learn to embrace that word, and we've got to recognize that we're learning from it. So when you kind of started trying to learn how to ride a bike, you're going to fall a few times, but each time you're falling off that bike, you're going to learn a little bit better. I was playing Fortnite with my 14-year-old daughter a few weeks ago, and I was horrible. But if I'm willing to embrace the uncertainty of these games that I'm no good at, I will get better and better and better. It's about not giving up. And it is about embracing agile. And I'm not talking about Scrum here. I'm talking about embracing the mindset. It's about embracing the growth mindset. It's about saying, hey, how can we try something different? How can we learn from something that we've done? So just looking at the time, Anshul, it's 7:56. I don't know if I'm good on time. But look, I hope today there's been something that you've taken away. I hope, if anything, it's given a desire for you to want to try something different. And I hope if any of you have kind of come to this with this debate of is agile better than traditional, or is this better than the other, that you're kind of going away and saying, hey, how can I embrace some new ways, and how can I grow, which in turn gives some of my projects better success by trying some new things. So I hope you enjoyed some of that. Anshul, over to
Yeah.
you. Any questions?
Sure, sure. So I think it was a quite a bit of things. Of course, people must be taking it from there. You have talked about uncertainties. You explained that how the risk and uncertainties associated with each other, how they are synonym or antonym, how they are going to affect the projects, how most importantly, what are the strategies what you can adopt to overcome these. Because these questions, what I'm seeing, I encourage audience, if you have some more questions, please put it into Q&A. I have a question from Sandeep, is that how can project leaders cultivate alignment between evolving business goals and project objectives for sustained project success? So it's a more of a kind of, the question which you normally would have answered in different forms. But yeah,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts about it?
Look, just very high level on that. Look, it does come down to collaboration, and it does come down to recognizing that project management is an enabler of value. And I think one of the challenges that we're seeing with not just project leaders, but business leaders is maybe the maturity of project management and the understanding is not quite there. We are not order takers to the business. You can't do all the planning behind closed doors, keep all the strategy to yourself, and hide information. I think one of the first things that we've got to recognize is everyone that's potentially going to work on the project, be it the pre-assigned team or team members from different parts of the business, need to be brought together to have that open discussion. And it's not just about project management. We've seen this in strategy, right? Strategy is done behind closed doors. Then we go to execute, and we're just misaligned from the strategic objectives. So for me, it's about breaking down the silos and bringing people together and saying, how do we unlock the collective intelligence of people? And the simplest way I can explain this, Sancho, if I have 50 brains in my company, 50 people, do I want one brain, me, telling 50 people what to do and treating them like puppets? Or do I want to unlock the 50 brains so we can create a tidal wave? And I think the faster we recognize that knowledge workers in the era that we're in today, the people doing the job know more than us. So if we're not embracing them and we're not bringing them in, then we just get misalignment constantly.
Yeah, means that goes very relevant to what we are doing at the moment. As you said, we always go into the situations where we talk about collaboration. You touch this point in your slides as well. The collaboration and coordination, that concept. The people think that collaboration is something like talking to each other, making them understand, and then taking their views is what collaboration is. But
Yeah.
actually, it's not that. Collaboration meaning that, as you said just now, for example, when you're planning something, when you're discussing something, you have to bring the people into the mind of the fact that diversification and misalignment is ought to happen. And that is what we always try to resist, right? Because we always go into a situation where we try to say, yeah, we don't need to go into disagreements, because
Yeah.
disagreements bring the complexity, and complexity will bring the hostility, and hostility will bring more hostility, and to cultivate a multiplier. But actually that is not the case. It all comes from the situation where people at the top and the people at the bottom need to think from same sort of mirror. Okay, if the people think in the junior side they cannot contribute, if the people in the junior side think senior people don't share, so that will never going to solve the things. Apparently there where the mid management comes and become a sandwich, and more or the less people will agree to that. Another question from Banil is that,
Can
is
I
there any
touch on
tool?
that point, Anchal, just very quickly?
Hmm.
Because we talk about this a lot. And what I say is think of the example of a puzzle, right? You
Mhm.
got a puzzle in front of you. Let's say it's got 100 pieces. I give you team one 25 pieces, another team 25. We've all discussed it in a room, but we then go off to piece the puzzle together. When you bring it together, it's not going to connect.
Same. Yeah.
That is cooperation, right? We're cooperating to deliver one thing. To me, collaboration is recognizing that all of us can work on this together. Yes, we can break into four teams, but we must stay together. And one of the challenges that we've seen is businesses are not understanding the amount of time and effort and the value of collaboration because the focus is always on execution. Why are you not executing? Why are you not executing? And then we have all these conflicts, like you said, with the silos. And I touched on it a couple of times. My managers just called me. Oh, my manager does my leave. So it's not my priority anymore, right? The project then suffers and we just don't get the consistency of flow. So some good points there.
Yeah. So one question from Benil, is there any best tools you would like to recommend to follow to avoid uncertainty? That is really the tough one.
Well, you cannot avoid uncertainty because we cannot predict the future. So until we can get that mystic ball and find the psychic that knows all the answers, the challenge is we have to embrace the fact that there's uncertainty. And I'll give you one quick example. If you are managing a project team and they are working 40 hours a week and you allocate them 40 hours of work, then you are saying you don't recognize uncertainty. You are saying you don't recognize that things will go wrong. And one of the best practices that we've seen is allocating people's time 80% to the work, allowing them 20% time to solve problems and deal with the uncertainty. Now, imagine going to your business leaders and saying, nobody now is 100% allocated. It is and it comes back to that typical immune system. If the business leaders don't get the understanding that uncertainty is here and this is how we deal with it, then things are not going to change. So it's down to us to be able to articulate why we need to do things and how it's inherently addressing. But there is no way to avoid uncertainty unless you lock yourself in a cave somewhere and ignore what's going on.
Yeah. And then how do we recover it if the uncertainty exists, is bound to?
Yeah.
Only way to recover it in the speedy way is to embrace it, and don't resist the changes, and don't resist the conception of the mind that uncertainty is there to create problems, right? As you
Yeah.
said, opportunity, think is opportunity, but what's your point to recover it in a speedy way?
Look, the bottom line is if you break down the work, we know sprints or iterations are nothing more than time boxes. We
Mhm.
know in traditional ways we have phased approach, right?
Mhm.
it's not uncommon. I think it's a language that people are getting hung up on. The bottom line is, if I plan for 3 months of work and I break it into 2 week sprints, then in that period of time, any uncertainty that takes place, and I'm collaborating constantly with what we call product owners, your business, your department heads, then that's how we recover. Because the furthest deviation we can have is 2 weeks. Now, to get to less than 2 weeks and to get to where Amazon is today, I think Amazon can deploy software every 7 seconds. There needs to be a heavy investment in automation, in DevOps. Most organizations are not going to get there. So the 2 week time box seems to be the ideal amount of time where we can plan something, do it, check it, adjust. And if something has happened, we have a decision point. The problem is with these lengthy sort of projects where we predict and then we got to get steering committee and we don't have the collaboration with the business, we can't make the right sort of decisions fast enough. So as I said, break your work down. You know, you don't want to call it sprints, you don't want to call it agile, you don't want to call it scrum, not a problem. It is a time box, and a time box of work that we can plan and embrace the fact that the worst uncertainty we're going to face is a 2 week period.
Okay, great suggestion there. I think we are running short of the time, but I will take one more question around there. More of a kind of, I did not understand the question there, but yeah, I think, okay, I am seeing quite a few, the heavyweight one, but I think the Varun has asked the one scenario-based question. It's more importantly is around, not from VUCA perspective, but what he's trying to ask that, how can Agile help embracing when the baseline development is already planned, but it is being cut short in order to manage the business as a kind of business requirement from the senior management. Does it make sense to you, Shahid?
Look, I'll try and attempt to answer this because, look, when I talk about baseline, that means the scope, time, and cost has been baselined. Look, like I said, even in agile ways of working, and I don't want to keep calling it agile. Look, there is going to be a time, just like when first project management, traditional ways came about, there is going to be a time we're not calling it agile. It's going to be the way we work. So what I'm saying is you can still do your large scale baselining, but you need to shift your mindset to recognize it is not 100% accurate. And one of the challenges that I'm seeing is we are being forced as project leaders, project managers to give an estimate, and then we are being held to that like it's if you change your mind, you've created the biggest crime in any organization. I think the recognition really comes down to shifting the mindset to say, hey, we've come up with a plan, we're going to break it down, but we don't know that this is at an accuracy level of anything more than 60, 70%. So it just comes back down to recognizing there's no harm in planning, but I like to call it discovery now. We do the plan and we discover to find the hidden paths so that we can rebaseline. And I think, Anshul, a lot of people forgot from the theory when they took it to practical, rebaselining is allowed in projects. It's just not allowed in the real world for some reason, right? So I've only been in one organization that I've worked in sort of 16 years of project management, where we could rebaseline and the business understood we're using shared resources and we didn't have the resource. So we're rebaselining, right? The cost is still running and it allows the business. So I think it really comes down to how do we rebuild the maturity beyond project managers and into business leaders to understand the importance and the strategic nature of what us project managers are actually doing and what it means as an impact to the organization.
Right, wonderful. I think that's a lot of knowledge coming from you, Shahid, over there, and then experience as well in terms of practical advices of the risks, uncertainties, VUCA, and then of course we spoke a lot about strategies and the baselining at the last to close. But yeah, thank you so much, Shahid. It was really a pleasure for me to have a collaborative discussion with you over this particular topic. Again, we are fortunate, but still I welcome that uncertainty didn't arise in this session. More importantly, I'm thanking all of you guys in the audience who have been great in asking the questions and helping us out to make this webinar much more effective as possible. A big shout out to the friends in marketing who has been responsible for posting all the information about these webinars in social media pages and the website. I think I would not say goodbye without saying a thank to rest of the PMI chapter volunteers who are always being there behind the scenes, and also includes further colleagues from membership team, outreach, volunteering, and finance side. So here I go and then wrap up for the night until our next webinar. I am behind my camera with Amir and Parvez and Bhavin. Wishing you all the very best, and then we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you, Shahid. Wonderful
No,
time
thank
ahead
you.
for you.
And
Cheers
like
up
you
for
said,
that.
thanks to everyone that took the time out of their evenings. Looking forward to connecting. Feel free to connect, and and thank you again to PMI for a wonderful opportunity.
Good luck. Thank you so much, Shahid.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Take care.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.